last thing I'm going to do before I create an actual sequence is I'm going to go back into my post-process volume. And I'm going to do a little bit of color grading. Crank the contrast a little bit. Take a little saturation out. See what happens when we add a little bit of gamma. I don't know if I like, yeah, it's a little bit. Pump the gain a tiny bit. Offset, I'm gonna leave offset completely alone. So that's like some global parameters, and you can go even further with this. You know, I like to kind of like, you know, get into the shadows and the highlights sometimes. It can be kind of nice to like, you know, create some interesting little effects with the color here. So I'm going to go ahead and do some grading here, and then we'll pop back in and take a look. Now let's grab a camera and put that in the sequencer. So in order to start a new sequence, what you need to do is hit up here in the cinematics and add master sequence. Name it whatever you want. I'm going to name it tutorial 2 and create master sequence. You can choose however many shots you want, how long they are, whatever. Alright, so now that we've got everything kind of set up, we can create a master sequence to kind of see how it looks and then tweak from there even more. So we'll grab a cinematic, add a master sequence, named it already, tutorial 2. I'm going to do one shot because I just, only want to do one. We'll do 2 seconds and what else? Looks good. So I already created one before, but I deleted it, so I'm just going to say yes. And so now we've got our master sequence with this one shot. We can go in here, and we've already got a camera in there. If you don't have a camera and you need to make one, just, go up to this little camera icon and click it, and it'll put a camera in there and a camera cuts track. You have to have a camera cuts track in here, otherwise you can't see anything. So just make sure that you, have that in there. So here's our, camera, and we're moving around now, and we're seeing everything. And so under your camera, you've got these different settings: your aperture, your focal length, and your, different manual focus distance. So let's go ahead and dial that in a little bit. Cool. So when you want to actually see the focal plane, you can actually click this debug focus plane, and it'll show you where you're focusing on. You can kind of see what this does here. If I wanted to get everything in focus, I could just open up my aperture a little bit more. You can kind of see everything there. Not quite as beautiful or cinematic when you do it that way, so, let's go back down to 2. I might go back to like 1 actually. Cool. So now we've got, a nice little camera in here going. We've got, some nice bokehs going, and, we've got some pretty sweet looking foliage and debris. So now what we need to do is we need to build our lighting. So you can see here that, we've got to build our lighting based on lighting needs to be rebuilt. Also, it looks like there's a texture pool error, which you can fix, but I'm going to show you guys how to do that another time. We'll just deal with this for the moment. So we're going to go ahead and build the lighting, and we're going to make sure that we're using production quality. Alright, and now we've built our lighting, and we're ready to animate our scene. So everything's looking really good, and I'm pretty happy with how this turned out for 2 hours. Why don't we pick our camera positions, and we'll animate our camera. So the way the sequencer works, it's a little bit buggy at times, but it's amazing that you can do this in Unreal, and it's a lot like After Effects if you're familiar with it, or Premiere. Any of the Adobe platforms, it's got a lot of similarities to that in the way that it deals with keyframes and curves and things like that. So if you're familiar with After Effects or Premiere, you'll have no problem with this. One thing I will note when you get into the sequencer is that there's like this green line here for your in, and there's a red line here for your out. There's no way to like just set that, which is so infuriating right now. But obviously there's ways to do it, so you can manually move them around and things like that, but they're really easy to grab by accident, and if you do that, it can mess up your shot a little bit, and it can screw with your renders and stuff, and so that's just something that you got to be careful about. So just be mindful of that and make sure that you don't move these. The other thing too that you're going to just need to make sure of is that you've got a camera cut sequence in your shot. If you don't have that in there, then it's going to be a little tricky, and it looks like I have one in there right now, but I don't think that it's attached to this camera. So let's see if we can attach it to the camera. If you click the little plus sign, you can bind this to a camera that's in your scene. So right now we only have one, so Cine Camera Actor 32 will bind it to that. Once you bind your camera, it will come up in this cutscene, and you can actually see these little icons. If you don't see these icons, your scene's not going to work when you render it. Make sure you see this, and if you don't, make sure you fix it. And again, the way to fix it is either when you click this and you bring your camera in, it'll bring in your camera and automatically create one of these sequences. And if it doesn't, or if there's a problem for somehow it gets unlinked, just go into your camera cuts track, hit the plus, and then new binding, and you'll find it there. So here we are in our camera cuts track, in our little camera component. So if we want to start animating this, let's go down to our transform. So you can spin it down just like you do in After Effects. and you've got location, rotation, scale. Also, just a note, if you want to add other things to this, you can go into track, and there's a bunch of options that you can do. So depending on what you're doing, a game, or if you're doing texturing, or if you're doing simulation, whatever, you have a lot of different things in here that you can sort of add in there. But most commonly it's transform, and that'll come in standard with the camera. If you're bringing in an actor, so let's say you wanted to transform this guy here, you could easily just go into your plus here, add actor to sequence, and then you would have to go and find him. So I don't really know what his name is, but let's go see what his name is. Alright, so it's TGVF. Let's see if we can find him. TGVF. Alright, I guess that's right. Cool. So now we've got him in our sequence down here. And let's see if we can move him. Oh, baby. It's like playing God. Alright, so now that he's back to normal, let's just show you what happens. You can actually keyframe this guy. So if you go into your location or transform, these little things here in the middle, they'll add a new key, and boom, now it's done it for all of them. So he's there, and let's say we want him to fall over. So we'll go down to our rotation, and the pivot's down here, which is good. If you want to move this thing, it's really, really, really annoying, and just to let you know how to do it, what you'll need to do is find the point that you want to move your pivot to, and let's say it's up here somewhere. Hold Alt, middle button on your mouse, and then you can drag it wherever you want it to be. But just to note, as soon as you click anything else other than literally what I'm about to do, it will not work again. It'll go back to where it was. So before you touch anything, you have to literally go over here and right click the actual mesh itself, and then hit pivot, set as pivot offset. And if you do that, and then you click out and you go back in, the pivot will be right there, which is super awesome. But if I do that like this, let's say I wanted to put it back where it was, right? So I hit Alt, and then I grab it and I go back down, and I'm like, oh cool, I did that. Let me go click something else. And then I go back in there, and I'm like, hey, wait, what? It's back where it was. Yeah, it's because you didn't go click that mesh, and you didn't say, hey, set, pivot, offset. You have to do that every single time. It's really annoying. But that's all right. Once you remember, you'll do it every time. So let's drag that back down. And set, pivot, offset. And now that we've done that, we've already still got that keyframe, so we don't have to do that again. So let's go over here and let's pivot him down on the rotation. You can do this a couple ways. You can do this manually in here, but I like to do this with some controls here. And we'll tilt him down, and then we'll hit global keyframe. So now, and you can obviously refine this animation if you want to, but if you play it down, you can see it crashes, kinda. Anyway, that's how the sequencer works in terms of animating things. And again, we're just going to animate the camera now because that's really what we're here for. So we're going to go to the beginning, and we're going to go pick our first frame, which is going to be somewhere down here. So we'll go ahead and hit our transform on the camera, and then we're going to go ahead and go to the end of the sequence because I'm just going to do one long shot. Probably should have fixed this edge here, but coulda, shoulda, woulda. Next time. Alright, so now we've got a focus that's tracking pretty nicely. Let's do a nice little rack at the end there. It's pretty nice. And you can do, tons of different custom camera moves. You can do whatever you want. This is just a very simple, straightforward camera move. But again, you can get pretty creative with this. So if you want to export your sequence, all you got to do is go over here to render, or you can right click and, well, actually you have to be out of it. So you got to go into the tutorial to master or the sequence of your name and right click, and then you can hit render shot, and that'll pop up with this render movie settings, and you can change it to whatever you want in here. I always go with EXR just because image sequences are better than rendering MOVs. Unreal has a variable speed frame rate because of the fact that, you know, you're compiling different things in real time, and, you know, your frame rate changes periodically. So as the render happens, your frame rate isn't always guaranteed to be the same. So you can end up with glitches and jumps and things like that. So it's always better to do an image sequence and then to bring that into some other program later and export it out as a movie or a ProRes. And you can change the resolution here to your liking whenever you want. I'm going to go with HD, and I'm going to use 30 because I think that that's what we've been doing in the sequencer down here. And keep it to Rec 709 for padding. We don't need to worry about that stuff. And here's a couple quick things that will help when you're exporting these. Make sure that you've got cinematic and engine scalability up, and then also when you're exporting it, if you have problems or errors, something that can help is if you go all the way up here and you find the general settings and you see use separate process here, sometimes if you click that, it'll actually render better and it'll alleviate some of the problems. So if you're having any issues, just use separate process and see how that works for you, and we'll go ahead and render that. Alright, and there we go. That's it. Bye.